What if one small act of kindness could change an entire life? Stay with us till the end to see how everything unfolds. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. The alarm clock on the nightstand hadn't worked in months, but Darius Johnson didn't need it anymore. His body woke him before dawn every day, the rhythm of survival stronger than any buzzing alarm. At 17, he had already grown used to the discipline of exhaustion. The narrow twin bed creaked as he rolled out, his feet landing on the worn hardwood floor that groaned beneath him. He moved quietly, tiptoeing past the room where his grandmother, Miss Ruby, pretended to sleep. He knew she was awake. She was always awake this early, but she stayed still so he wouldn't worry about her. Through the thin wall, he could hear the fragile whistle of her breathing. Every inhale sounded like effort. Every exhale carried the weight of years. Their small house on Elm Street told its own story. The paint on the outside, once a cheerful yellow, had faded to the dull gray of old newspapers. The porch sagged in the middle, warped from decades of weather and footsteps. The windows were patched with duct tape because new glass cost more than they had. And yet, inside, Miss Ruby kept the place spotless. "Being poor doesn't mean you can't be proud," she always said. Darius carried those words like armor, though sometimes they felt heavier than the dish tubs he hauled at work. He slipped into the same jeans he had worn yesterday, checked the pockets for change, and found exactly $3.47. Enough for a bus ride to work, but not enough for the ride home. That meant another 3-mile walk in the dark later tonight. He didn't complain. He had walked farther for less. The streets of the city were a map of different lives. On his way to the diner, he passed blocks of neat houses with trimmed lawns and shining cars parked in driveways. Farther down, the neighborhood shifted. Apartment buildings with cracked sidewalks, parking lots filled with potholes, and faces carrying the kind of weariness money never sees. He moved quickly past the abandoned shopping mall, a broken skeleton of steel and glass where older kids gathered to smoke and trade dreams they didn't really believe in. For Darius, the mall was more than an eyesore. It was a reminder of what the neighborhood had lost, what it could have been, and what it still might be if someone cared enough. Murphy's Diner glowed at the corner of 5th and Main, its neon sign flickering against the pre-dawn sky. Inside, the air smelled of grease, coffee, and routine. Big Mike, the owner, was already behind the counter, prepping for the breakfast rush. He nodded at Darius without speaking. Their relationship was built on mutual respect rather than words. Mike knew Darius showed up every day, never late, never lazy, never complaining. That was enough. The kitchen was already hot, steam curling off the griddle as plates clattered in the background. Darius's hands moved automatically. Stack the dishes, submerge in hot, soapy water, scrub, rinse, dry, repeat. Hours disappeared into the rhythm of dishwashing. His hands were rough now, scarred by detergent and endless repetition. Sometimes he wondered if college students' hands felt different. Softer, maybe. Hands that turned pages of textbooks instead of dish towels. He didn't let himself wonder for long. College felt like a dream for other kids whose parents had savings accounts, not stacks of overdue bills. By 7:15, his shift ended, but his day was just beginning. Roosevelt High School was a tired red brick building on the east side, its paint peeling, its lockers jammed, its computers so old they belonged in museums. But here, Darius was not just the boy who washed dishes. He was the boy who aced tests, who tutored classmates during lunch, who teachers quietly pointed out as the one who might break free. Mrs. Patterson, his English teacher, once told him, "You have a gift, Darius. Have you thought about college?" He had laughed nervously, the word college sitting heavy in his mouth. "I can't afford it," he had said. "Maybe not today," she answered, "but dreams have a way of finding funding when the dreamer is worthy." He wanted to believe her, but belief didn't pay tuition. At lunch, while classmates bought trays of hot food, Darius pulled out the peanut butter sandwiches he made at home. He ate quickly, then opened the college brochures Mrs. Patterson had given him. State universities, community colleges, programs in business, and nonprofit work. The numbers beside the photos, tuition, room, board, were staggering. Even with scholarships, it would take everything Miss Ruby had and more. He folded the brochures neatly and put them back in his backpack, where they felt like both a promise and a burden. After school, he returned to Murphy's Diner. The evening shift brought different customers. Families celebrating small victories, couples stretching out their meals to prolong a date, elderly people lingering over coffee because loneliness was easier to fight in public. From behind the counter, Darius noticed everything. The way a woman at table 3 counted her coins carefully before ordering. The way a tired man in a suit left larger tips on nights when the staff looked especially worn. The way kindness moved through the diner in small, unspoken gestures. By the time he returned home, his legs ached from standing. But Miss Ruby was waiting, as always, in her recliner. The oxygen tank hummed beside her, but she smiled when he walked in. "How was your day, baby?" she asked every night. "Good, Grandma. Yours?" "Better now that you're home," she always answered. They didn't talk about the doctor visit she skipped because of money. They didn't talk about the pills she divided into smaller doses to make them last. They didn't talk about the applications hidden in his backpack. Some conversations were too heavy for evening light. Instead, they watched the news together. Stories of other people's lives, both triumphs and tragedies, that felt far away from their own. For Darius, the world beyond Elm Street might as well have been another planet. But even from the recliner, Miss Ruby whispered her faith. "Keep that heart of yours generous," she told him. "It's gonna take you places you can't even imagine." That night, when he lay back in his narrow bed, Darius thought about her words. He thought about the crumbling houses on Elm Street, the broken windows of the mall, the tired faces of his classmates. He thought about the kind of future where someone like him might do more than survive, and though he couldn't see how, he held on to the quiet belief that maybe, just maybe, life had more waiting for him than dishes and duct tape. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that a choice was waiting for him just around the corner. A choice that would test everything Miss Ruby had ever taught him. A choice that would take him from this faded house and that endless dishwashing station into a story no one could have predicted. And tomorrow night, at Murphy's Diner, that story would begin. The November rain didn't fall softly. It attacked. Sheets of water slammed against the windows of Murphy's Diner like fists, turning the parking lot into a restless sea of puddles and distorted reflections. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed, the coffee pots hissed, and the smell of frying onions clung to the air. The storm was loud, but inside the diner, the silence felt louder still. Customers huddled in booths waiting out the weather with bottomless cups of coffee and half-hearted conversations. Darius wiped down his last table of the evening, the rag heavy with water and soap. His stomach felt hollow, not just from hunger, but from anticipation. For 3 days, he had saved every penny, skipping snacks, walking home instead of paying bus fare, drinking water instead of soda. All for this moment. On the counter sat his prize. A burger stacked high with toppings and a side of crisp fries, the kind of meal he rarely allowed himself. Tonight, for once, he would sit like a customer, not a worker. He would taste not just food, but freedom, the freedom to choose something for himself. But just as he reached for the tray, his eyes caught movement at table 6. The corner booth, usually reserved for birthdays and couples stretching out their night, was occupied by two figures who seemed utterly out of place. An elderly white couple, their clothes soaked through as though they'd walked straight out of the storm. The woman's silver hair clung to her face, dripping onto a designer coat that still looked expensive, even waterlogged. The man's suit hung on him like wet paper, though his posture remained ramrod straight, proud even in discomfort. Before them sat only 2 cups of coffee, drained to the dregs. They had been there over an hour, nursing those empty mugs like lifelines. Darius's brow furrowed. He had seen customers down on their luck before, but this felt different. The woman rifled through her purse, desperation sharpening each movement. Lipstick, tissues, reading glasses tumbled onto the table, but no wallet. She whispered urgently to her husband. He checked his coat pockets, then his pants, then back to the coat. The same result: nothing. His expression stiffened, the kind of look a man wears when he's used to control but suddenly finds himself powerless. "I don't understand," the woman said aloud, her voice trembling. "I had it when we left the house." "I know I did." Her husband's answer was a slow shake of his head. His hands lingered on an antique gold pocket watch, polished but empty of solutions. He snapped it shut with a sigh. Sandy, the evening waitress, approached hesitantly, check in hand. She had been around long enough to recognize the signs. Nice people in a bad situation. It happened more often than anyone wanted to admit. "Folks, I hate to bother you," she said softly, "but here's your ticket." She held it like it might burn her fingers. The woman's face crumbled with shame. We're so embarrassed," she stammered. "We seem to have misplaced our wallet. I don't know how this happened. It's never happened before." The man straightened his shoulders, trying to hold on to dignity. "Perhaps we could leave something as collateral," he offered, setting the pocket watch gently on the table. "My wife also has some important papers." "I'm sorry," Sandy interrupted, glancing nervously toward the kitchen. "Mike has a strict policy. No exceptions." Big Mike himself appeared in the doorway, arms crossed over his chest. His face was set in stone, not cruel, but firm. "I wish I could help, folks," he said, voice lower than his expression. "But rules are rules. I have a business to run." His words left no room for negotiation. The diner ran on thin margins. Charity, even for the elderly, could break it. The couple rose together, dignity holding them upright, though the storm waited just outside. The woman clutched a leather portfolio to her chest as if it were armor. As she stood, Darius caught a glimpse of what lay inside. Official-looking documents, embossed with a golden logo that seemed familiar, though he couldn't place it. Something about it tugged at his memory, but before he could study it further, she snapped the portfolio shut. Lightning flashed through the windows, illuminating their broken-down car outside, a stranded luxury vehicle that looked as out of place in the diner's lot as the couple did inside. The man reached for the door handle, but the woman paused, glancing back once more at the warm room they were leaving behind. Her eyes, rimmed red with either rain or humiliation, met Darius's for the briefest second. That was enough. Darius looked at his tray. The burger steamed softly. The fries glistened with oil, golden and hot. It was more than food. It was 3 days of sacrifice. It was the choice he rarely had. But across the diner, a different choice stood shivering, pride crumbling under the weight of circumstance. "Wait," Darius said, his voice stronger than he expected. He set down his rag and walked quickly across the floor. "Sandy, hold up." The couple turned, startled. Their eyes were tired, wary, yet searching. Darius didn't hesitate. He set his tray down on their table and slid into the booth across from them. "This one's on me tonight," he said simply. The woman blinked, lips parting in protest. "Oh, sweetheart, that's very kind, but we couldn't possibly. Please, Darius insisted, pushing the plate closer. My grandmother always says kindness is the only thing that multiplies when you give it away. For the first time, the man really looked at him. His pale blue eyes fixed on Darius with startling intensity, as if he were seeing more than just a teenage boy in a diner uniform. Something flickered in those eyes, calculation, maybe recognition, but his voice was steady. Son, this is your meal. You worked for this. I can't take it from you. Darius waved over Sandy. Can you bring them fresh coffee? And maybe let them use the kitchen phone to call about their car? Sandy's face softened, and she nodded quickly. She had seen many things in her years waiting tables, but this was rare. The woman, Margaret, picked up a fry with trembling fingers. We haven't eaten since breakfast, she admitted. Her husband, Harold, gave a small nod, though his eyes never left Darius's face. What's your name, son? Darius. Darius Johnson, he replied, feeling strangely self-conscious. Harold, the man said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, far stronger than Darius expected. And this is my wife, Margaret. Margaret offered a faint smile, though she still clutched the portfolio tightly, as if afraid of exposing its contents again. For a few moments they ate in silence, broken only by the clink of cups as Sandy refilled their coffee. Then Harold leaned forward. What do you want to do with your life, Darius? The question was abrupt, almost ceremonial, but it carried weight. Darius shrugged, embarrassed. Maybe study business. Something to help my community. Roosevelt High needs computers. We don't have a clinic nearby, and that old mall's been sitting empty for years. Feels like a waste. Harold exchanged a glance with Margaret. She clutched the portfolio tighter. The golden logo flashed again before disappearing behind the leather flap. Outside, the storm continued to rage. But inside, something had shifted. The air around the booth seemed charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. Darius didn't notice. For him, it was simple. Two strangers needed help, and he had the means to help them. That was all. What he couldn't know was that the car outside hadn't really broken down, that the missing wallet wasn't missing at all, that Harold and Margaret Whitmore were far from desperate travelers. He couldn't know that every word, every glance, every choice was part of something much larger than he imagined. All he knew was that tonight he had given up his meal for strangers. And somehow it felt less like losing and more like winning. The morning after the storm, Roosevelt High buzzed with the low hum of ordinary chaos, lockers slamming, sneakers squeaking on waxed floors, laughter and gossip filling the halls. For Darius, it was supposed to be just another day of classes after a long night of work. He carried his backpack heavy with books and half-hidden college brochures, his mind still lingering on the couple from Table 6. He told Miss Ruby about them before bed, expecting her to smile proudly. Instead, she listened intently, asking questions about their appearance, their car, their words. Silver hair, pale blue eyes, she repeated. You never know, baby. Sometimes angels come disguised. Darius had laughed it off, but now, walking through the hallways of Roosevelt, her words echoed strangely in his ears. At the end of first period, the intercom crackled to life, silencing the chatter. Darius Johnson, please report to the principal's office. The announcement hung in the air like thunder. Darius froze mid-step. In all his years at Roosevelt, he had never once been called to the office. Students stared, whispering as he made his way down the corridor. Teachers paused at their doors to watch him pass, his heart hammered as if he had done something wrong. Through the glass walls of Principal Elena Martinez's office, he saw them. The elderly couple from Murphy's Diner, but transformed. Margaret sat poised in a flawless designer coat, no trace of rain or distress. Her silver hair was perfectly arranged. Harold stood beside her in an immaculate suit, polished shoes gleaming beneath the office lights. His posture commanded the room, and his piercing blue eyes no longer looked desperate. They looked authoritative, calculating. Spread across the principal's desk were folders, papers, and documents stamped with the golden emblem, the same one Darius had glimpsed in Margaret's portfolio the night before. The secretary gestured him inside. "Mr. Johnson, they're waiting for you." His legs felt unsteady as he stepped into the room. The door closed behind him with a soft click. "Hello again, son," Harold said, his voice deep and steady. No trace of last night's vulnerability remained. This was not a stranded traveler. This was a man accustomed to boardrooms, decisions, and power. You're Harold Whitmore," Darius stammered, recognizing the name at last. The articles in newspapers, the whispers in town, the rare mention of one of the wealthiest philanthropic families in the state. Whitmore Foundation, worth hundreds of millions, known for funding schools, hospitals, and community projects across America. "I am," Harold replied, his faint smile both reassuring and unsettling. "And last night, Darius, you bought dinner for one of the most powerful philanthropists in this state. Do you know why?" Darius's throat tightened. "You needed help." "That's all that mattered." "Exactly," Margaret said, her voice smooth, confident. She leaned forward, her portfolio open, documents fanned across the desk. "That's what we wanted to see. Not kindness for recognition, not generosity for gain, but character when no one was watching." Principal Martinez slid a thick folder across the desk. Darius's school photo was clipped to the front, his name bold across the cover. Candidate Assessment, Darius Johnson. Inside were his transcripts, straight A's marked in neat rows. Letters from teachers describing his maturity and compassion, notes from neighbors about the groceries he carried, the driveways he shoveled, the students he tutored, even a statement from Big Mike at Murphy's, praising his reliability. "You've been watching me?" Darius asked, his voice low, half in disbelief, half in anger. "Evaluating," Margaret corrected gently. "For 3 days, we've been in this community. We asked about you, observed you, created a situation to see who you really are. And you passed, Darius. More than passed. You exceeded every expectation." Darius's fists clenched at his sides. "So the car? The missing wallet? The embarrassment in front of everyone? It was fake?" Harold's tone was matter-of-fact. "Staged, yes, but your choice was real. Your response was authentic, and that's what mattered. It was a lie," Darius said, his voice sharper now. "A test," Harold countered firmly. "There's a difference. We needed to know what kind of young man we were dealing with. And now we do." Margaret opened a fresh folder and spread architectural blueprints across the desk. The papers gleamed with sharp lines and bold letters. Darius blinked. At the top, in elegant print, it read, "Darius Johnson Community Development Center." What is this?" he whispered. "Our most ambitious project yet," Margaret explained. "The Whitmore Foundation has purchased the land where the old Riverside Mall stands. We plan to build a state-of-the-art community center, medical clinic, computer labs, job training programs, a library, even a commercial kitchen for local businesses. A $25 million investment dedicated to revitalizing this community." She tapped the name at the top of the blueprint. "And we want you to lead it." Darius felt the floor tilt beneath him. "Me? I'm just a dishwasher. You're already more than that," Harold interrupted, his voice cutting through doubt. "You're a leader. Your teachers see it. Your neighbors see it. And last night, so did we," Principal Martinez finally spoke, her voice full of conviction. "Darius, in 30 years of education, I've never seen an opportunity like this. They're offering you more than just a scholarship. They're offering you the chance to transform your entire community." Margaret slid another paper across the desk, an official scholarship agreement. Full tuition, room, board, expenses covered at any accredited university. Summer internships with the foundation. A guaranteed path to return as assistant director of the new center, with the possibility of becoming director within 2 years. Darius stared at the numbers, at the logos, at the impossible promises. "Why me?" he asked quietly, almost pleading. "Why not someone else?" "Because transformation has to come from within," Margaret said. "We can fund buildings, hire staff, write checks. But real change requires someone who loves this place enough to stay, to fight, to build. That someone is you." Harold's gaze locked on him. "And we know money won't corrupt you. Because when you had to choose between feeding yourself and helping strangers, you chose them." The words hit harder than the storm outside. Darius felt torn, between gratitude and betrayal, between disbelief and wonder. The documents on the desk glowed like a dream, but the truth behind them stung like a wound. He looked at Principal Martinez, who nodded firmly. "This is real, Darius. The only question is, are you ready?" Darius lowered his gaze to the blueprints, his name emblazoned across the top. The Darius Johnson Community Development Center. His name, his neighborhood, his chance. The weight of it pressed down on him, terrifying and exhilarating all at once. And though he didn't yet know what his answer would be, one thing was certain. His life would never be the same again. 18 months later, the skyline of Elm Street looked different. Where the abandoned Riverside Mall had once stood, its broken windows a symbol of decline, there now rose a building of glass and steel, bright against the morning sun. The sign above the entrance read in bold letters, "Darius Johnson and Community Development Center." For the people who had lived too long with boarded-up storefronts and empty promises, it was more than a building. It was proof that transformation was possible. The opening week felt like a celebration, but also like a promise fulfilled. Inside, the first floor bustled with activity. The medical clinic was already changing lives. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a young physician who had grown up in a neighboring county, welcomed patients with a calm smile. In just 6 months, she had treated hundreds of residents who once had to travel miles for basic care. Seniors who had gone years without checkups now came regularly. Parents brought children for routine visits without worrying about the cost. And, for Miss Ruby, it was life-changing. Her diabetes was under control, her arthritis managed with physical therapy. The oxygen tank she once relied on had been retired. Sitting on the renovated porch of her home, she teased her grandson. "Baby, you see that sign with your name? That's the man you became when you chose kindness over convenience." Upstairs, the hum of computers filled the air. The computer lab was rarely empty. Adults who had once felt left behind in the digital age now sat at rows of screens, learning skills they never thought possible. 30 adults had already completed digital literacy programs, and many more were enrolling. Mrs. Carter, the corner store owner, discovered she had a knack for digital inventory management. Jerome's mother, once convinced her chances at a career were over, completed a graphic design course and landed her first freelance client within weeks. For students at Roosevelt High, the lab was a second home. Their test scores rose sharply as they gained access to resources that had been absent for years. Down the hall, the job training center thrived. Automotive repair. Bays buzzed with drills and clanging tools. In the kitchen wing, the smell of spices and roasting chicken drifted from ovens as students practiced culinary skills. Certification programs opened doors to real employment opportunities. Employers across the county began taking notice, calling the center first when they needed new hires. "You're teaching people skills that matter," one construction foreman said. "These aren't just classes, they're futures." Perhaps the most unexpected success came from the center's commercial kitchen. Big Mike, once known only for running Murphy's Diner with military precision, expanded his catering business here. He hired 6 new employees, all graduates of the training program. Sandy, who had served countless customers at the diner, finally opened her own cafe inside the community center, offering coffee and pastries to staff, students, and visitors. For the first time, she wasn't just taking orders. She was running her own business. The transformation spread beyond the walls of the center. Roosevelt High's graduation rate improved, fueled by tutoring programs and study spaces now available every evening. Abandoned houses around Elm Street were renovated by residents who had learned construction skills through training programs. Property values began to climb. Crime dropped 18% in the first year, not because of heavier policing, but because people had better things to do. Jobs to keep, classes to attend, children to raise with hope instead of fear. Local news caught on. Channel 7 aired a feature titled The Darius Effect, highlighting how one center sparked renewal across an entire neighborhood. The governor visited for the ribbon cutting, shaking hands and praising the Whitmore Foundation for their vision. But Harold and Margaret Whitmore stood quietly at the back, letting Darius take the spotlight. "This isn't about us," Harold said in a rare interview. "It's about what happens when character meets opportunity." At the grand opening ceremony, Darius, now 20 years old and a sophomore at State University studying nonprofit management, stood on stage. His posture carried a new confidence, though his eyes still held the same kindness that had once prompted him to give away his meal. He thanked his community before anyone else. "This center exists because of the people who believed in each other long before the money arrived," he said. "Because Mrs. Patterson believed her students could go further. Because Big Mike showed respect to a kid washing dishes. Because Miss Ruby taught me that generosity multiplies when you share it." The crowd erupted into applause, but what struck observers most was not his words. It was the sincerity behind them. Even so, the work was only beginning. Darius knew it. For every success story, there were still families struggling, still students falling behind, still neighbors carrying burdens that a single center could not erase. But now, there was hope, and hope was contagious. "Sustainability," he told a reporter after the ribbon cutting. "That's the next step. We're not just providing services, we're teaching people to provide services for each other. In 5 years, this community won't need us the way it does now. It will be helping other communities instead." 6 months later, the numbers spoke for themselves. The center had generated 43 new jobs, launched 12 small businesses, and placed 67 people in full-time employment. But beyond the numbers were faces of residents who felt dignity returning, who looked at their neighborhood differently now. The boarded-up mall had been replaced by a place of possibility, and it bore the name of a boy who once washed dishes for $8 an hour. Darius sat in his office late one evening, reviewing applications for a new scholarship program the center was launching. His office walls told the story of transformation, photos of the center's construction, the first graduating culinary class, Miss Ruby cutting the ribbon at the medical clinic expansion. A picture of Harold and Margaret at last month's appreciation dinner hung near his desk, their smiles proud but understated. He knew they had given him an extraordinary opportunity, but he also knew he had to prove every day that their trust was not misplaced. Through his office window, He could see children playing in the center's playground while their parents attended GED classes. Their laughter carried across the courtyard, light and unburdened. It was a sound the neighborhood hadn't heard in years. Darius leaned back, letting the noise wash over him, a reminder of why he worked the hours he did, why he carried the weight he carried. The center was no longer just a project, it was a living, breathing heartbeat of a community. But Darius also understood something else. Sooner or later, he would face his first true test as a leader, a test not unlike the one Harold and Margaret had staged for him, but this time it wouldn't be orchestrated. It would be real. And when it came, his choices would determine not just his own path, but the future of everyone who now looked to him for guidance. For now, though, he let himself smile. The boy who once gave away his only meal was now a man helping thousands eat, learn, and live. Yet deep down, he sensed that the story wasn't finished. Because kindness, he realized, is not a single act, it is a commitment. And the next chapter of his commitment was waiting, just beyond the doors of the center that bore his name. The diner hadn't changed. Murphy's still smelled of coffee and grease, the neon sign still flickered outside, and the booth still carried the wear of years of elbows and spilled drinks. But for Darius Johnson, walking into that familiar place now felt different. He wasn't the boy saving pennies for a burger anymore. He was the director of the community center down the street, a leader whose name was etched on glass walls where hope now lived. And yet, Murphy's still held the roots of his story. It was here, at table 6, that everything had begun. Sandy, still waitressing after all these years, hurried over as soon as she spotted him. "Darius," she whispered, leaning close, "there's a family in trouble. They came in an hour ago, ordered just enough to keep the kids quiet, and now they can't pay. Their car broke down on the highway, and they don't know anyone in town." Her eyes searched his face. "It reminded me of that night. I thought, maybe." "Where are they?" Darius asked. She nodded toward the corner booth. Darius turned and saw them, a young Hispanic couple with 2 children huddled close. The parents whispered frantically, counting coins and shaky hands. The kids pressed against each other, wide-eyed, too quiet for their age. Their clothes were worn from travel, their eyes shadowed with exhaustion. The woman, Rosa, tried to explain in broken English, apologizing for something she had no control over. The man, Miguel, rubbed his temples, shame written across his posture. The sight pierced Darius like a memory. He remembered Margaret's trembling hands clutching her portfolio, Harold's stiff posture, the shame that weighed heavier than the rain that night. Only now he understood fully how easily desperation stripped people of pride, how hard it was to look someone in the eye when you had nothing left to give. Without hesitation, Darius walked to the counter and ordered 2 hot meals. He carried them to the booth and set them down gently. "This one's on me tonight," he said, his voice steady but kind. Miguel looked up in surprise. No, we cannot." "You can," Darius interrupted softly. "Eat, rest. You've been through enough." Rosa's eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "Gracias." They began to eat slowly, almost reverently, as if afraid the food might vanish. Darius sat with them, listening as their story unfolded. They had been driving north for work. Miguel was skilled in construction, Rosa in child care. Her cousin had promised opportunities, but their car had broken down just outside town. Their savings had gone to the towing fee, and now they had nothing left. "We want to work," Miguel said earnestly. "We are not asking for charity. We just need a start." Darius reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. Simple, professional, embossed with the gold logo of the community center. On the back, he carefully wrote their names. Miguel and Rosa Santos, he said aloud, repeating the names the way Harold once repeated his. Tomorrow, come by the center. I can't promise everything, but I can promise a beginning. Miguel's eyes widened, suspicion and hope warring inside him. You would do this for us? Darius smiled. Someone once did it for me. Now it's my turn. The next day, Miguel stood in the construction training program reviewing opportunities with instructors who immediately recognized his skill. Rosa met with the family services coordinator, discussing part-time positions in the child care wing. Their children joined other kids in the youth program, their laughter echoing down the halls. By the end of the week, Miguel was already helping fellow trainees with electrical wiring, and Rosa was assisting teachers in the playroom. For the first time in months, the Santos family slept without fear of tomorrow. That evening, Harold Whitmore called. His voice, as always, carried both authority and warmth. How are things going, Director Johnson? Good, Darius replied, watching Miguel show another trainee how to handle a tool with steady hands, while Rosa organized supplies for the daycare center. Really good. I think I finally understand something you once told me. And what's that? Harold asked. That kindness is the only investment that always pays dividends. Harold chuckled softly. And what's your return rate so far? Darius looked out at the bustling center. He thought of Miss Ruby, now healthy and proud, of Jerome, accepted into college, of the jobs created, the businesses launched, the families rebuilt. He thought of the Santos family, already finding their footing after just one act of kindness. His answer came without hesitation. Immeasurable. That night, as he walked home past the glowing glass walls of the center that bore his name, Darius felt the weight of everything he had built, not as a burden, but as a responsibility. Transformation, he realized, wasn't a destination. It wasn't about the ribbon cuttings or the newspaper articles. It was a choice, made over and over again. A choice to see people, not just their circumstances. A choice to give when it costs something. A choice to believe in possibilities others couldn't see. The Darius Johnson Community Development Center now served more than 4,000 people every year. Families found medical care. Adults discovered new careers. Children grew up believing their futures could be bigger than their zip code. But for Darius, the most important number would always be one. One act of kindness. One meal given to strangers on a stormy night. One decision that multiplied into thousands of changed lives. And as he closed the door behind him that evening, Miss Ruby waiting in her chair, the truth settled in his heart. His story had begun with a single choice. But the legacy, the real legacy, would come from ensuring that choice was never the last. Because somewhere, in some diner, another young person would face the same test. And when they chose kindness, the world would change again. Kindness can change more than one life. It can transform entire communities. If this story inspired you, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below.